welcome to chillTV's continuing coverage of the 2020 BC provincial election presented by Simpson Notaries. My name is Clint Hames, and today we're welcoming candidates from the Chilliwack-Kent riding. We have Laurie Throness on behalf of the BC Liberal Party. We have Jason Lum, who's running as an independent, and Kelli Paddon on behalf of the New Democratic Party. I'd like to say just a few words about our debate format this evening. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and then the evening will be divided into 3 15-minute sections, each on a different topic. Each candidate will answer the questions, and I'll attempt to moderate a discussion between the candidates afterwards. Let's see how it goes. We've divided the candidates up by giving them numbers, and the first lot was drawn by Jason Lum, so I'm going to ask Jason to take the next couple of minutes and introduce himself and introduce the community to his thoughts and ideas about this election. Jason.
Thank you very much, Clint. Well, my name is Jason Lum. I'm a 3-term councillor in the city of Chilliwack. I'm a 4-term board chair with the Fraser Valley Regional District. Before my elected career, I was the president of the Chilliwack Chamber of Commerce. I served on a number of nonprofit charitable organizations, including the Fraser Valley Healthcare Foundation. I'm a father, a recent father. I've got a 7-month-old son. My wife and I live in Yarrow, and we've spent over 30 years here in Chilliwack-Kent. I'm running as an independent because I'd like to give the constituents of Chilliwack-Kent an alternative to the status quo. I'm running because I believe people deserve better. They deserve somebody with the proven background and leadership to be able to deliver results back here to Chilliwack-Kent. And I look forward tonight to some great discussion, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Jason. Next up, we have Kelli Paddon, who's representing the New Democratic Party. Kelli?
Hi, my name is Kelli Paddon, and I'm the BC NDP candidate for Chilliwack-Kent. I am a public servant, I am a mother, and I've lived in Chilliwack-Kent with my husband and children for the majority of my life. I accepted the BC NDP nomination because I recognized and felt that Chilliwack-Kent deserved an inclusive voice, someone who will represent all the priorities and voices in Chilliwack-Kent. And for me, that meant the BC NDP. I believe that our plan is what will bring British Columbians through the pandemic, what will support strong economic recovery, what will take care of our health and our schools, and most of all, our children. This election for me is about who can best represent the values and the vision of Chilliwack-Kent moving forward, and who will be at the decision-making table and making sure that the voices of the people here are amplified and that our needs are really being met. As part of the BC NDP team, I look forward to implementing John Horgan's platform, his plan on working together, and moving BC forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kelli. And lastly, our existing MLA and representing the BC Liberal Party, Laurie Throness.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks to chillTV for having us here. I've been MLA in Chilliwack-Kent for 7 years now, and have really enjoyed my time serving the people and would love to do that again. I want to begin by talking about my sense of inclusion. My political opponents have cast me as being a strong supporter of conversion therapy, but I want you to know that that's not true. In fact, I've never made a statement about conversion therapy, and I decry and I oppose any coercive practice to change one's identity. Throughout my 7 years in politics, I have always publicly affirmed the dignity and nobility of every person. I accept, I respect, I care for every person in BC, LGBTQ or otherwise, and I support their rights as well as the rights of those with more traditional views. Now, I want to go on to talk about our platform just a minute. It's a tremendous platform. We would widen the number 1 freeway right to Whatcom Road. We would have more treatment for those addicted to drugs and alcohol, and that would help our homeless and our poverty and our crime problem in Chilliwack. We'd drop the PST to 0 for a year. We'd eliminate the small business tax, and we'd stimulate the economy by helping tourism with loan guarantees. And perhaps most importantly to my constituents, we would provide a choice. between ICBC and private auto insurance, helping young drivers especially. So we think we have a great program. I look forward to talking about that more. And we have a chance for change now. BC Liberals have a tremendous record of economic management, and we would like to put that to use now by making a change so we can bring the COVID economy out of the COVID storm and bring us back to economic health. So thanks very much again to chillTV for having us here, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thanks very much, Laurie. Now we're going to move into a section where I'm going to ask a question of all three candidates, and they're going to respond. And I came up with these questions by reaching out into the community and saying, what are the things that are on your mind right now? This is a pretty amazing time that we've been through in the last 7 or 8 months. We're dealing with a global pandemic, and that pandemic has had health consequences in our communities. That pandemic has also had economic consequences for the entire province, and so we're in a position right now where the economy is top of mind for very many people. We know there are investments that have had to have been made to ameliorate the condition caused by the pandemic. And also in our own community, the one thing that is very top of mind for folks is dealing with the crisis in homelessness, mental health, and addictions that we see every day on our streets. So those are the top topics that came up. So I'm going to start by asking Kelli, and I'll reverse the order as we ask these questions. Each candidate will have an opportunity to answer. As cases begin to rise in our community and in British Columbia and in Canada, what do you think needs to be done differently? We've had a pretty good record in British Columbia, but we now see those cases rising. We're not sure what the cause might be. What do we need to do differently to reverse the trend that we're seeing with COVID-19 in our communities in British Columbia?
Thanks for that question. I think that it's important to first of all acknowledge that this is a time that nobody anticipated. Everybody is feeling uncertain. We're not sure what to expect in the future. And when we see cases going up, or when the numbers are starting to look like they're scary, we're going to feel that fear for ourselves, for our families, our loved ones, our kids, and our entire community, really. We've been really clear that the public health and Dr. Bonnie Henry have been telling us what needs to be done, how we can keep the cases low. The BC NDP has invested in making sure that over the fall and winter, we're safe and that we can be healthy and move forward. I know that we're going to be talking about the economy recovery in a moment, so I'm going to stick just to the COVID situation now. The uncertainty here is most likely what is the biggest contributing factor to us being scared and being nervous. The BC NDP has invested in making sure that healthcare is a priority. They're hiring new healthcare workers, and they're really making sure that testing is amped up and that we can respond and make adjustments as needed.
Thanks, Kelli, very much. I'm going to switch up the question just a little bit for Laurie and to say, Laurie, how would you assess the job that the province of British Columbia has done to date with the pandemic? And then what do you think we need to do differently as we move forward, as cases begin to rise? It seems there's a segment of our population that doesn't seem to pay attention to what Dr. Bonnie is telling us to do. Where do you think we should go from here?
Well, I think we've done a good job with COVID, and I think 85% of British Columbians feel the same way. The government has followed the advice of Dr. Bonnie Henry, has given expert advice. Obviously, we've flattened the curve. We only have about 260 deaths compared to many other provinces and countries which have much higher rates of death, and so we've managed to flatten the curve, although there are some distressing signs of late. What I would suggest is that we need to do two things. We have regular conference calls as MLAs with Dr. Henry, and so I asked her in a conference call recently, I said, let's decide as a society not to lock down anymore. Instead, let's decide to ramp up testing and to ramp up contact tracing so that we can find and isolate the virus, and then we can all live normal lives and we can get our economy back to normal. And she said, I agree entirely. And to her credit, she has just hired or is hiring 500 new contact tracers, and tests are now up to 11,000 a day. And they didn't have the machinery to bring it up higher, but they're now getting that machinery, and they're going to ramp that up to 20,000 a day. So I think that's really important, that we be able to live normal lives, that we find and isolate the virus, because we're going to have to live with this virus for some time to come. The second thing I think we need to do is institute random testing. Like you would do a poll, a political poll, where you have a statistically representative sample from around the province. If we do that, then we can find out the prevalence of the virus. Maybe 30% of British Columbians have had it. We just don't know, because we only test those with symptoms. So I think random testing would find the prevalence of it, and then we would know just how deadly it is. And also it would help us find hotspots. And those hotspots would be revealed through random testing. So those two things, I think, will help us to come back to a normal economy, help us to come back to a normal cultural way of life, and help us into the future to cope with this ongoing problem.
Thanks, Laurie. Jason, you've been on the outside looking in. Laurie, of course, is our MLA and been in the heat of the battle. And Kelli, of course, is representing the party that's currently governing. So they have an inside view of this. You're a bit on the outside looking in. What's your sense on how we've done in managing the pandemic and what needs to be done as we move into the future to maintain some semblance of normal with our economy and, of course, beat this disease back?
Well, thank you for the question. Listen, I want to give kudos where it belongs, because both the BC NDP and the BC Liberals and the BC Greens prioritized setting aside the partisanship, the hyper-partisanship that often characterizes exchanges at the legislature, and they focused, instead of fighting each other, to fight the virus. And for a small window of time, British Columbians got to see what it was like when parties worked together instead of working against each other for the public good of British Columbians. I wouldn't characterize it as actually being on the outside completely, because as the chair of the Fraser Valley Regional District and a councillor with the city of Chilliwack, we were completely involved with frequent updates with Fraser Health, with Dr. Victoria Lee, with Dr. Bonnie Henry, giving and receiving feedback on some of the new public health orders that were coming out and how they were affecting, in particular, the city of Chilliwack and constituents here in Chilliwack-Kent. I think it's incredibly important right now, with cases on the rise, to double down on our commitment to follow Dr. Bonnie's health orders. I certainly don't feel comfortable pontificating on public health advice. The only thing, the feedback that I provided in the numerous calls that I was involved with was perhaps focusing on some clarity and consistency in some of the messaging, and then just using us in local government as vehicles to help get that communication out to the public. I think that's incredibly important. And then the last thing I'll say really quickly is that I've been approached in particular by a lot of young people who are often precariously employed. They're employed on the front lines, working, they're bagging our groceries, they're serving coffee at the coffee shops. And there seems to be quite a bit of blame going around that young people are exclusively responsible for the spread of the disease in this kind of second wave. And I would just put forward that we didn't do that in the first wave when it was mostly seniors who were being affected. So I think we have to be very, very careful how we characterize this.
Thanks, Jason. We're going to go to a quick break now and be back with the debate after these messages. Thanks so much for everybody for watching the BC election coverage on chillTV, presented by Simpson Notaries.
I'm Josue Anderson. I have the privilege of running as an independent in the snap election for the Chilliwack riding. I am not a trained politician. I was born into poverty and left school with student debt. Now, I'm retired at 30. I'm a small business capitalist. And we need to work together to make the hyper-wealthy start paying their fair share so the tax burden stops falling on the working class. As an independent, the only people I have to answer to are the people of Chilliwack. I'm here to listen and to fight for all of your rights.
Welcome back, everyone. We have had a brief discussion in our break about whether there's a need to debate the pandemic response, and the candidates believe there isn't much that they want to say more than that, and that they don't disagree with anything they've said to each other. So that's an unusual time. However, we'll respect that and we'll move on to the second question. I'm going to start with Laurie this time, and I'd like to talk about the post-pandemic recovery. Governments across the country and the world are amassing huge deficits, which are being converted into debt. And while it's understandable during the pandemic, we need a plan to move forward after the pandemic to recover that. The Liberals have a plan that says we're going to get rid of the PST in 1 year and have it down to 3% in the second year, which is going to assumingly acquire debt. And then they've announced recently an infrastructure program that is going to spend about $8 billion on infrastructure. There's two real questions in there. What's the plan moving forward to pay that debt off? And second of all, out of the $8 billion infrastructure program, how much can we expect to see coming to the Chilliwack-Kent riding?
Well, thanks very much for the question. As for the amount that will come back to Chilliwack, there are many things that will be spent, say, in widening the highway or other transportation initiatives like expanding TransLink to the Fraser Valley that won't necessarily come right back to this riding, but will benefit our riding. And so that $8 billion is going to have many indirect benefits to our riding. But it's true that governments across the world have gone into deficit, and we're no different. What we want to do is have a 5-year plan to bring the budget back into balance, and we have to realize that the $12.5 billion deficit that we're facing now is made up of $5 billion in spending and $7.5 billion in lost revenue because the economy is lagging. So what we need to do to shorten that number, to reduce that number, is to bring our economy back into a state of health. So that's why we're cutting the PST to zero for a year, is to accelerate business development. A business that wants to buy that piece of machinery to save labor might be able to afford to do that. A family might be able to buy a washing machine or a new dryer, or whatever they need. It's going to accelerate purchases and bring the economy back more quickly to health. And that will help stem the hemorrhage of government revenues. In fact, it will raise other taxes and perhaps even pay for itself. So that's our plan. And then we have a 5-year plan to spend on infrastructure. So when I think of widening the number 1, when I think of replacing the Massey Tunnel with a 10-lane bridge, I think of time savings. Think of the millions of hours that are spent sitting fuming on the freeway when you could be spending those times in productive labor. And so all of these things will attract business investment. They'll keep companies in Vancouver and attract companies to Vancouver because we have a good transportation system. So that's how we're planning to handle the economy, not through raised taxes, but through increased economic growth. And we're going to do that through our infrastructure plan and our cutting taxes and our plan to cut taxes. So that's how we plan to do it.
Thanks very much, Laurie. Jason, if you're in a position to go to Victoria and sit as an independent, you'll essentially have to choose between a plan that's put forward by potentially the NDP or the Liberals. Which one are you inclined to support? What do you think we ought to be doing as we move forward into a recovery, economic recovery from our pandemic?
Thank you for the question, Clint. You know, what I just heard from Mr. Throness, I have some challenges with. I know I'll get an opportunity to address those as we kind of debate, but in my role as an independent MLA for Chilliwack-Kent, I'm more interested in what direct benefit are coming back to the voters here in Chilliwack-Kent. And to me, a 10-lane bridge in Delta is not a direct benefit to the voters here in Chilliwack-Kent. Widening the highway to Whatcom Road still excludes Chilliwack-Kent. The Fraser Valley doesn't begin and end in Abbotsford. So again, we have to focus on the direct benefits coming back to Chilliwack-Kent, to this riding. If you do the math, if there's $8 billion in spending, it's pretty easy on who I'll choose to support. I'll support a party that has a direct benefit to Chilliwack-Kent at $8 billion, $192 million of that capital spending should be spent right here on the needs of Chilliwack-Kent, whether it's a sewage treatment plant up in Cultus Lake, whether it's a new pool and recreation center in the District of Kent, whether it's the tens of millions of dollars in diking infrastructure required here in Chilliwack. We desperately need all of those things. And as your independent MLA, that's exactly what I'm going to go to Victoria and fight for on your behalf.
Thank you, Jason. Kelli, I haven't heard much, and I've looked, I haven't heard much about the NDP's economic recovery plan. Can you tell us what that looks like from your perspective?
I'm really happy to tell you about the economic recovery plan. One of the things that I'm really excited about with the BC NDP is that we recognize that people are the economy. And so by investing in people all across British Columbia, we're investing in our economy. This means grants for businesses that protect up to 200,000 jobs. This means investing in affordability and supporting people so that they can go to work because they have childcare, or they can invest in their businesses because of the PST savings. It doesn't include a PST cut like the BC Liberals, because that doesn't help with the things that people have to pay for every day, like rent and childcare and groceries. Those things are already PST free. By investing in everyone in British Columbia, we can recover the economy, and we can put ourselves in the best position to make sure that moving forward, our small and medium-sized businesses, which are the lifeblood, especially here in Chilliwack-Kent, they're supported and they're flourishing. We're investing in tourism. We're making sure that we're consulting. We're making sure that the money is getting to the people who need it, not to people who don't.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to enter a time where we have about 15 minutes or so for the candidates themselves to maybe question what they've heard from each other. I'm sure there are things that need to be said. Who'd like to start? Laurie, Jason made some comments there about wondering what's going to happen for Chilliwack. What's your response to
Well, sure. I think it's quite easy for Jason to say that he's going to get $192 million for Chilliwack, and I think we should hold him to that should the people choose him. I think it's a tall order. There are huge infrastructure projects that cost billions or hundreds of millions, and one of those is the widening of the number one. Really, the bottleneck begins in Whatcom Road, and that's why we're bringing it to Whatcom Road. There are huge demands all over the province for transportation upgrades and other infrastructure things. And I also want to point out that I have fought for infrastructure in our riding. I've fought for an extended water treatment facility in Harrison. I've fought for the Hammersley pump station there, which is a $6 million bill, for the Miami pump station. And there have been, in the regional district, there have been grants for water and different things like that. So I have indeed fought and won the battle, and perhaps with Jason's help, we fought for the Vetter Bridge and the associated 2 roundabouts that go with that. So there is infrastructure that is important infrastructure that we have brought to this riding, and I would certainly fight to do that again.
So let me ask Kelli. I didn't hear anything in what you said about infrastructure. I heard investments in childcare, investments in people, not infrastructure. Is there nothing in the NDP's plan that talks about widening the freeway or investing in infrastructure like schools or hospitals?
That's a great question, thank you. Infrastructure is definitely a big part of moving BC forward, and the BC NDP have committed to widening the number 1 highway to Abbotsford, which, as my colleagues have mentioned, is not Chilliwack, but will definitely benefit us in moving goods, in moving people, so that people have more time at home and can access the things that they need more easily. The BC NDP is also investing in building new schools, in building new hospitals, and BC Cancer Plan, which is going to add a lot of benefit for not only our area, all of British Columbia, but people of Chilliwack-Kent will definitely benefit from that as well. There's going to be investments in healthcare workers in addition to the building of hospitals and schools, as well as upgrading of schools who need seismic upgrades. So the BC NDP really is focused on the infrastructure. They're making huge investments to make sure that BC is secure. It will create so many jobs locally, and they're making sure that we're going to be moving forward together, and that we'll be able to move around together through our transportation infrastructure, and that people will be taken care of.
Thank you, Jason. The comments there suggest that there are going to be investments, but I didn't hear from either the NDP or the Liberal candidates about actual investments in Chilliwack as a part of that. How can you as an independent make that happen? You wouldn't be part of a government. You would only be knocking on doors. What's your plan for you to advocate for Chilliwack if you're elected as an independent?
Well, I've spent a good 10 years here knocking on doors in Victoria and getting a pretty good response, no matter which party was in power. And I think bringing forward some of the skill set that I've acquired over my whole career in public life, working with people across party lines, making an extremely good case about the infrastructure deficit here in Chilliwack-Kent. In my time as chair of the regional district and as a councillor with the city of Chilliwack, working in local government with the Union of BC Municipalities, it's become clear that unfortunately political parties play games, especially around election time, with their spending announcements, and it pains me to see these huge multi-billion-dollar investments go into swing ridings where parties want to win power, and it does not serve the constituents well. And as an independent, I'll continue to raise that concern and that alarm. But I also believe that if the polls continue to tighten up a little bit here, that we may be in a very enviable position in Chilliwack-Kent to help make the case, put our case forward for a list of infrastructure priorities in order to gain confidence by whichever party should form government.
Thank you. We're going to take another quick break and we'll be back to talk about our third question as we move forward. I'd like to thank the candidates for their answer and their civility. It was great, and the information I think is going to be very helpful as people move forward and begin to make decisions. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be back with more of chillTV's BC 2020 election coverage, presented of course by Simpson Notaries.
Hi, I'm Diane Jansen, and today I wanted to talk to you about how passionate I am about Chilliwack. I've had the privilege of serving you as a city councillor, school trustee, and executive director of Chilliwack Community Services, and I've seen firsthand what we can do together when we focus on healthcare, education, infrastructure, and serious issues like homelessness. On October 24th, I ask for your support, and let's make Chilliwack even better.
Hello everyone, and we're back to chillTV's 2020 election coverage. We're on now to our third section and our third question for the candidates, and I'm going to start with Jason and then go to Kelli and then Laurie. And the question revolves around the crisis that many communities, Chilliwack included, are facing, with people who live without a place to actually live, people who live on our streets suffering from mental health crises and addictions. So homelessness, mental health, addictions have become huge issues in our community. I think the last homeless count done showed there were 400 people living on our streets. Many of those people are suffering with mental health challenges as well as addictions. We've tried many things, and it appears that we're not getting any better at understanding how we deal with this issue. Communities like Vancouver have the downtown east side. We're hearing things out of Maple Ridge where they have tent cities that are getting out of control. We hear that this is a growing problem in places like Kelowna. What's the answer? What do we need to do differently? What we've done already doesn't seem to be working. What does Jason Lum do if he goes to Victoria to help resolve this issue for the community of Chilliwack?
Thank you for the question. So it is a shame that we live in a society with so much abundance, and yet we have people who continually fall through the cracks. Vulnerable folks who live without a home, suffering with mental health addictions. We have an opioid crisis. We need more supports. We need more mental health workers. We need more outreach workers and support workers. We've been fighting for years for assertive community treatment, an ACT team here in Chilliwack, which will focus on person-centered care to help people out of addiction into a home. We build more homes and more housing for those who need it. We provide skills training, jobs, access to health care. There's a whole host, a multifaceted response that we need to provide. And as your independent MLA, those are the exact things that I'll begin day one fighting for in the legislature. It is critically important, and it's an issue that is very close to my heart.
Thanks, Jason. Kelli, the NDP have been in power for a number of years. They certainly have a history of being supportive of social issues. The problem hasn't gotten much better in the last few years. What's the plan from the NDP perspective to move this issue into a more positive direction?
It's a great question. So when the BC NDP formed government, there wasn't a system in place, and we have started the work to make sure that we can support those most vulnerable in our communities. One of the reasons that I ultimately decided to step up as part of the BC NDP is because of my experience and my history in amplifying the voices of people who need it, people who traditionally don't have the voices that get heard. And here in Chilliwack-Kent, that includes individuals who are homeless, which they may be struggling with mental health issues, they may be struggling with addictions, but we also know that these may be people with disabilities. These may be people who came onto affordability issues. The BC NDP is taking a multifaceted approach, like Jason just said, because this is an intersectional issue. We can't talk about a single cure. We can't talk about a single fix because there is no magic bullet. What we're doing is we're investing in treatment beds for those who do struggle with addiction, doubled the number of youth treatment beds, and new treatment facilities, including facilities for First Nations. What we're doing to deal with homelessness is that we're increasing housing and we're working on affordability for British Columbians, which will also definitely benefit the people in Chilliwack-Kent. This is an issue that is not going to go away overnight. People are struggling, and the BC NDP is stepping up to make sure that systems and services that work will be in place to support them. Our work has only just started here. We have a lot more to do, and I'm very excited to get to work.
Thanks very much, Laurie. This is an issue that was around when you were an MLA previously and is still around. And we're not seeing huge improvements. What do we need to do differently from what we're doing today, in your mind?
Well, thanks, Clint. When I became an MLA, we had about 70 homeless people on our streets, and now we have about 400. So the problem has got much, much worse under the NDP. I think what we need first for homeless people is homes. And so when we were government, we funded hundreds of new units of affordable housing in Chilliwack, and to their credit, the NDP continued that. So together we funded about 475 units of affordable housing, and that houses a lot of different homeless people. But compounded on that is a problem of public order, because we have criminals who want to take advantage of the situation, and the crime problem has really gotten out of hand, not only in Chilliwack, but in all places. When I became Parliamentary Secretary for Corrections when we were in government, I toured all of the prisons in BC, and I talked to officials and many inmates, and I found that addiction to drugs and alcohol drives crime in BC. It drives homelessness, it drives poverty, it drives gang violence, it drives ill health. Just almost every social ill comes from addiction to drugs or alcohol. So I decided that my one thing as an MLA would be to get more residential treatment, long-term treatment for people to get off drugs, to become free from drugs. Once in a standing committee, I asked officials, what's your object, what's your goal for those who are addicted to drugs? And they said, to help addicts live positive lives. It wasn't to cure addicts, it wasn't to help them break free from their addiction, it was to maintain their addiction and help them live positive lives. And to me, we need a different emphasis. We need an emphasis on certainly helping people, saving them from death, of course, and helping them with harm reduction, but then moving them on to long-term treatment, residential treatment, to help them get free from drugs or alcohol. And I think that would do more to help on the streets of Chilliwack than just about any other policy we could do. So I've been a big proponent of that, and in our platform, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to spend $58 million in purchasing new mental health workers and police officers to help with order, and also provide more long-term treatment.
Thanks very much. I'd like to move into the discussion phase on this. One of the strategies that's been employed in a number of different countries, and certainly to varying degrees, has been the strategy of harm reduction, reducing harm. I'm wondering, when we look at countries, there are a number, Portugal and others, where harm reduction has played a huge role in reducing the number of people addicted. To what extent do you think harm reduction should go as a pillar, if you will, in the battle against addictions? How far should we be going with harm reduction? I think we have everything from needle exchanges to, in fact, safe injection sites to safe supply, those sorts of things. So let me start with Kelli. What role do you think harm reduction has to play in addictions?
It's a great question, and I know a lot of people are curious about harm reduction and what that actually means in real life. So I think harm reduction is effective when it's paired with the other things that are necessary to surround it: prevention, education, treatment. We need to support people. One of the things that I find difficult to wrap my head around is the linking of homelessness with criminality. And that's disturbing to me, because everybody deserves the dignity of a home. And there may be situations, as we've discussed, as we know, where these individuals struggle with substance use, where they struggle with mental health. But that's not always the case. Being homeless is not criminality. And I think that the reason that the BCNDP focuses on treatment, on prevention, on keeping our kids and people safe, and on harm reduction is because that's one of the things that will help people move forward into better lives, into a better quality of life, and it will allow them to be part of these communities where they can be productive, where they can be happy, where they can live better lives. So to discount homelessness or even substance abuse as being just all involved in criminality, where policing would be the solution, that isn't the only solution. It's one piece of the work that has to be done, and the services and supports that have to be there.
Thank you. I'll move back to Laurie on this. You talked about the issue of criminality and people who are homeless, and that drugs and alcohol do play a role in a lot of crime in our communities, and working on a task force that certainly has outlined that very clearly. One of the challenges, of course, is we don't have enough capacity in our court system to deal with the prolific offenders that tend to gather around vulnerable people and take advantage of vulnerable people. What is needed in terms of our court system to be able to make the changes necessary to be able to put prolific offenders in jail and, in fact, have them rehabilitated? What role does that play in this complex crisis?
That's a good question, Clinton. In our platform, we have 5 or 6 ways that we are going to help our court system move people through more quickly. I think sometimes we do an injustice even to criminals when we keep them waiting for justice. And so we're going to hire new Crown prosecutors and a number of other measures that are more technical that I can't repeat right now. But we're going to improve our court system. I wanted to say, with regard to harm reduction is like the emergency room in a hospital. We need the emergency room. We have to save people. But it would be terrible if a person had some disease and was rescued from death and then sent home. No, we have to send that person on to the hospital. And what is that hospital? It's long-term treatment leading to freedom from drugs. Do you know that Fraser Health doesn't fund any abstinence-based treatment? Instead, we're spending like $100 million a year on methadone alone. So we think that that needs to be righted. We need to change course a bit, and we need to place the emphasis more on getting free from drugs and a little less on harm reduction, because it seems to have become all harm reduction. And so we need to change course, and that's in our platform. We would do that, and I think that's what the people of Chilliwack want.
Thanks, Jason. What Laurie has said is we need to stop so much focus on harm reduction and move into long-term treatment. What role do you think harm reduction plays in this puzzle?
Before I answer that, Clint, I do want to acknowledge and give kudos to Ms. Paddon's point that she made about not further stigmatizing those who are suffering from homelessness. Part of, I think, my role as an independent MLA is to acknowledge when good words are being said and to, again, like I said, be able to work with whoever is in power. So I just wanted to identify and acknowledge that. I've spoken out about the stigma placed on those who are suffering with multiple disorders, mental health addictions, etc. And I think further stigmatizing them is incredibly harmful. In terms of harm reduction, I agree it's an important pillar in the strategy. But it's easy to sit and talk about, we need this, we need more. We've put forward at the City of Chilliwack a homelessness action plan. We've begged the successive provincial governments for the supports we know will help those suffering from homelessness here in Chilliwack-Kent. And we're still asking for those supports to come through. Mr. Throness pointed out some of the work that he did as a parliamentary secretary with, I believe, Dr. Darrell Plekas at the time, the Blue Ribbon Panel on Crime. They identified some incredible solutions, toured the whole province. And what happened to that report? Their party put it on a shelf. They didn't follow some of the incredibly important recommendations that came out of that report. We unearthed that report and brought it forward from the City of Chilliwack to help advocate for some of these important things. And I think part of the challenge here, again, is when you're involved in a political party and you're getting bigger and you're focusing on the perpetuation of the power of the party versus the real needs of the citizens of Chilliwack-Kent, you start to get away from that good evidence-based public policy. And that's what I'm here to deliver on behalf of the citizens. Good evidence-based public policy.
Thanks very much, Jason, and thanks to all the candidates for those great answers, and I hope that they were informative to the people watching. We're going to take just a short break, and then we'll be back with our candidates who are going to make some closing remarks. So continue watching chillTV's BC 2020 election coverage presented by Simpson Notaries. Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to say thanks to everyone for participating in this evening's debate. Now we're going to hear from each of the candidates. They've got a couple of minutes to summarize some of their thoughts for you. As we move forward, I want to say thanks to chillTV and the candidates for quite an eventful evening. I think that we've heard some good information that should help make it easier for us to make our decisions. So I'm going to toss it over now to Jason for his final comments. Jason?
Thank you very much, Clint, and again, thank you for having me here today. Thanks to chillTV. No matter what happens in this election, I know the constituents are well served when they get good access to the candidates, and it's an incredibly challenging time during a pandemic to have an election. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed being here and being able to share with you some more information about me and my background. A lot of people have had a good opportunity to learn from my past 10 years serving in the City of Chilliwack and both my roles in the regional district and various nonprofits and charities. I realize it's a tall order what I'm asking people to do, to think a little bit outside of their party box and to instead support an independent, sending them to Victoria to work hard every day on their behalf. I'll put forward that it provides me as an independent the ability to work with clarity and precision on the issues most important to you. I don't have to toe a party line. All I have to do is focus directly on the needs of Chilliwack-Kent. and deliver results. And I believe I have a proven history in doing so. So I'm asking respectfully for your vote, Jason Lum, as your independent MLA.
Thank you so much, Jason. Kelli Paddon for the NDP.
So I've really appreciated the opportunity to share my thoughts and a little bit of John Horgan's plan with everyone. One of the things that happened when I was considering the nomination for the BC NDP was that I talked to my family. I talked to my kids, two awesome teenagers who are not old enough to vote. And one of the really powerful statements that they made to me was that every decision that happens over the next 4 years through this pandemic and in the economic recovery impacts their opportunities. It impacts the opportunities and choices that they'll have as adults. And for me, when I look at John Horgan's plan, that is the plan that will protect my children. That's the plan that will move my family forward, my neighbors forward, my community forward. I am devoted to Chilliwack-Kent, and I want to come and bring my skills here, my skills for advocacy, my skills to amplify your voices, to make sure everyone is represented and that nobody is discounted. I want to address the issues that are happening here, and I want to be part of John Horgan's team as we move BC forward. I think that we have a real opportunity to have someone with a strong voice, with an advocacy voice, sitting at the decision-making table within the provincial government, and I want to make sure that that's Chilliwack-Kent. I do think that I'm the best choice to make sure that that happens for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelli, very much. And Laurie Throness, representing the BC Liberal Party.
Well, I want to thank chillTV for having us here, and I want to thank my colleagues. It's difficult to run for office, and I applaud anybody who wants to do that. But I want to reflect a little bit on the last 3 years. Back in 2017, when the BC Liberals left office and the NDP took over, we left the NDP with a AAA credit rating, with a $3 billion surplus, with 5 years of balanced budgets, even after the punishing recession of 2008. And what happened after a couple of years? The surplus is gone. We have 23 new and raised taxes, and then COVID comes and the financial cupboard was bare. We are economically vulnerable, and we're facing a $12.5 billion deficit as a result. So just compare their record with ours. Today, in this election, we have an opportunity for change. BC Liberals have an excellent, proven track record of economic management. Maybe it's time now that the NDP have flattened the curve with the advice of Bonnie Henry, maybe it's time to turn the reins back over to those proven economic managers who can bring our economy back to health. Well, it's been my pleasure to serve this riding for 7 years. It's a joy to be an MLA, and I hope that you'll consider supporting me and the BC Liberals again. Thanks so much for watching tonight.
Thanks very much, Laurie, and let me echo words I just heard to say thanks to all candidates who are joining us, and thanks for your commitment to this community. Running for office, as was said, is not an easy thing to do. You certainly put your life on hold for a period of time, and you go out and ask the community to support you, and you have nothing but my admiration and respect for doing that. I'd like to say thanks for everyone watching chillTV's BC 2020 election coverage, which has been presented by Simpson Notaries. We'll be bringing you interviews, debates, and on our 24th election night coverage in the coming days. Stay tuned for that. Thanks for joining us, and if you haven't done so already, remember you can vote early, and if you don't vote early, remember to vote on October 24th. Thanks very much, and I'm Clint Hames.